when I am working with my clients, I tend to work with companies that, whether they self-identify or not, do have a lot of the traits of conscious capitalism companies. That's who I'm attracted to. For some reason, they're attracted to me as well. So at some point in our engagement, we do often start talking about sharing financial information. And there are a lot of reservations. Things like everybody's going to come wanting more money. Or the employees are going to think that the business owners are just pocketing all the profits and off buying yachts and sports cars. Or they won't understand the financials. We're going to address all of these objections going through, and any other concerns or objections you might have as well. There's concern that they're going to share the information, or that they'll jump ship if the report isn't good. They'll be scared and be working on their resume, or that their management team and their finance team won't go for it. All of these objections, concerns are addressable, and we'll talk about that. So with all of that, there are still a lot of reasons that companies want to do this. The employees will understand what's going on better. I was working with one food manufacturer, and when you're a food manufacturer, as you change products that you're making, you need to really clean the machines well so that you minimize the waste. When we started quantifying the waste, the employees really got it. Obviously, there was a standard operating procedure, and they were, doing what they needed to do. But when they saw the dollar figure, it really clicked that what the impact of cleaning the machines between runs meant. They come up with new ideas. Actually different manufacturer that I was working with in the pandemic, the marketing guy found some new packaging that was safer and just marginally more expensive, just a tiny bit more expensive. And it really helped us keep our market share during the pandemic. Working as one, breaking down some of those silos. Vito, you're muted.
Yeah, Judi, I love what you just said. You said we. So you identify with your clients in
Always.
such a way that you are part of the team. I think that's remarkable, and thank you for that.
Always, thank you. A service business that I was working with, the sales, they were selling to large, Fortune 500 companies, big enterprises. And the salespeople would go out and make sales and hand it off to the implementation team. But, in these companies, the person that you're dealing with to close the deal is not the same person that's getting the invoice. So when the invoices were going to the wrong people because we didn't have the right contact info, and the money wasn't coming in the door. So, when we realized the flow of the money was getting stopped, we put a little process in place and a little check sheet for the salespeople to get the accounts, the accounting people, and get those to the finance people. And that sped up the flow of money really, really easily. So you can break down some of those barriers when you see how the finance throws through the business. I was with one company for quite a while, and many of their staff were looking for ways to save money or improve profit margins or improve value. But there was one guy in particular that was just a freaking rock star at this. And it could have been annoying because he was coming to me regularly with, what if we did this? And what if we did this? But he'd have, pretty fully formed financial models and great ideas. And he was just a pleasure to work with. It was so much fun. And ultimately, you'll get the employees thinking like owners. There are lots of ways to do this, obviously. But definitely being transparent about financials increases engagement with your employees.
Judi, I'm
Yes.
going to pick up on your invitation to chime in.
Please.
That the employees can be invited to think like owners. Does that mean that they might have some incentives for, even financial incentives for finding ways to save the company money?
Yeah, I've seen companies do that. That's a great point, Eleanor. I've seen companies do that. Many of the companies that I work with do some sort of formal or informal profit sharing. Some of them are looking at becoming ESOPs. So yes, both informally, a little reward for coming up with an idea, or much more formally and broad-based through all different sorts of profit sharing mechanisms. So absolutely, yeah, it's beneficial for them too. So you, Mr. and Ms. Business Owner, also get some benefits. You're going to get a little bit more clarity into your financials, possibly. They say if you really want to learn something, teach it. Well, if you're going to explain your financial performance to everyone in the company, you're really going to have to understand what's going on. And, why is this change happening? Why is that change happening? So you'll get more clarity. You'll have to do some thoughtful planning. I'm going to talk about how to mitigate they think the owner's taking all the profits. Most owners that I know are reinvesting into their business. They're not taking big paychecks. They're not pocketing all the money. But having to explain this is going to really push you to have a well thought out plan. And conversely, if the company isn't doing well, you're going to need to have a turnaround plan as well that you're going to need to articulate. Vito, what's up?
Well, I find that in my work and talking to owners about getting paid quicker or better, they don't have systems in place, and their team doesn't understand. It's interesting when I do presentations to medical groups, I talk about this idea that the staff has to understand and be on board, because they can be even worse than the non-paying clients or patients. Oh, Judi, she's been coming here for years. I know she's going to make good on this. I know she's going to make good on it. And, Judi owes money for a year. So you have to explain it in a way that they can feel good about asking for the payment or encouraging people. And I find debtors, particularly in the medical practices that I work with, the debtors think the doctors are making a gazillion dollars.
Billions of dollars, yeah.
Yeah. And, he doesn't need the damn money. Look, he's driving a Mercedes.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And, I often say to a doctor, so isn't it interesting how people will judge the value of your education?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting twist, but the same is true in other businesses, not just.
So in that sort of business, if I was in there, I would be presenting financials from a cash perspective, showing what was brought in the door and what was spent. Because if the money isn't coming in the door, that's going to hurt the business, obviously.
Yep.
So I'm sorry, I forgot to go back to sharing, and I was talking through these slides. The next benefit that you get is when, and I've seen this in a couple of different businesses, when employees, especially the frontline sales folks, and even sometimes the owners, really see what the profit margins are, they tend not to discount as deeply, and will close the deal anyway. So that's another benefit. And the business ultimately performs better. So let's get into the meat of this. Let's talk about how do you do this? The first thing and the most important thing I want to share with you is that it really has to be done slowly. This is going to be many quarters, perhaps a few years to get to where you might ultimately want to go. It's going to require sharing information at a rate that your employees can digest it and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and educating them every step along the way. This is the most important and the hardest thing to do. Also think about where you want to get to. You know, there's a spectrum of sharing nothing with no one and sharing everything with everyone, and lots of points in between. You know, many companies might share pretty much everything with their senior leadership team, or they might share a decent amount of stuff with their management team. Occasionally, companies will share some surface level metrics with everyone. And there are a few companies that are sharing everything with everyone. This is very varsity level stuff. I would not recommend starting here. We're going to talk specifically about payroll, but it's sharing everything with everyone right out of the gate. You're going to find most of your employees just, their eyes are going to roll up in their head. They're not going to understand it. They're going to misinterpret it. So without the background and the foundation, you can get in trouble starting here, but you may want to wind up here. So, all right, so let's talk about payroll. This is not something that most companies do. Most companies do not share all their payroll information, meaning that everybody knows what everybody else makes. The benefit to this is that this can start to break down the pay gap, the wage gap between men and women and between different constituencies. But you have to already, your ducks have to be in a row, meaning you have to be paying equitably across the board. You have to have excellent systems where people understand why I'm not up here, you know, what I need to do to get to this pay level. There are companies that are doing this. You might have heard of Gravity Payments. They're sharing, everybody knows what everybody makes. They have baselines. I have met with business owners that are much more open about their pay. This is something that a business owner may choose to do without sharing everything else. We know business owners skip paychecks at times. We know business owners are, not only are they skipping paychecks, they may be putting money into the company at times. Many business owners that I've worked with don't take a lot of money out. They reinvest it into the business. And when times get tough, the first paycheck that gets cut is theirs. So that's something that I have seen business owners share, especially in troubled times. You know, I'm cutting my pay before I'm laying anyone off or cutting your 401k match or any of that. So payroll's a lot tricky. Be very conscious and thoughtful about what you're going to share and how you're going to share it. You have to start with the basics. You really, really have to educate your team. Depending on what kind of business you have, obviously, if you're running an accounting firm, you don't have to explain what a P&L is. But if you're running a manufacturing firm with different levels of education, perhaps multilingual, you're going to have to be really conscious about educating your people over and over again in many different ways, because, you know, some people get it from listening to it, some people will get it from seeing, some people will get it from reading. So you're going to start very, very simply and explain in a lot of detail, more times than you probably think is necessary, how the financials work, how the financials are structured. I do have a couple of examples here of what I would show. One thing to keep in mind is, as you're sharing financials, these don't have to be GAAP financials. And I will show you a couple things in here that are different from what you would see in a audited P&L, for example. So this is a manufacturer. So many companies will share sales data. I think it's a great idea to also share cost of goods data and broken out labor, ingredients, packaging. Employees may have ideas about how to reduce waste, which will reduce ingredients. I talked about the marketing guy and one of my former clients coming up with a great packaging idea. So this is great information and not terribly sensitive. Share total cost of goods, and you need to explain what this all means. This cost of goods will go up with sales. This percentage should stay roughly the same. And then this profit is what you have to run the rest of the company. Then what I would do is I would lump things in big buckets. You usually see an SG&A bucket. I do like to break out occupancy. I had one client that had a bunch of different warehouse spaces. I'm sorry, Eleanor, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted you to say what SG&A stands for, just in case.
Thank you. Sales, general, and administration. This is all of the back office stuff. This includes sales folks, probably includes marketing. This is all of the non-product producing stuff. Usually occupancy, which is your building, your utilities, maybe some of your insurance, usually that is lumped in there. I like to break it out. I had one client that had a ton of warehouse space. Some of it was for excess inventory, but honestly, a lot of it was just for crap that they had. And one of the employees said, we can get rid of all of this stuff. It's just, they had just stored stuff in there like we do in our attics and basements, and it wasn't anything anyone needed. So a bunch of us, and I even did this, I even came in and jeans and sneakers and t-shirt and helped go through all of the stuff in one of these warehouse spaces. And there's going to be another. So you see the net profit. This is where I'm going to stray from GAAP financials, because you'll see a net profit of $200,000, and we know the business owner isn't taking that home. There may be debt servicing that doesn't show up on a standard P&L. Oh, there may be taxes, regardless of whether the company is a corp or a pass-through entity. Oftentimes, the taxes on the profit will be paid by the company. The financial mechanics of it don't matter here. What matters for this purpose is that that money is going to come out of the company to pay the taxes on that $200,000 of profit. And then, like I said, all the companies that I'm working with are reinvesting. So having this CapEx and investment line item shown here and having a plan that ideally your employees have helped you create of what you're going to do with that year after year is really beneficial, really helps get them on board. Vito.
Yes, Judi, on my LinkedIn page, I have a chart that is really well received when it's explained. And if your uncollected amount, so people owe you $25,000 in your AR, and your profit margin is 20%, let's say, that means that you need to generate $125,000 in new business to cover what's sitting out there in your AR.
Yep.
The chart goes from 2% to 20% profit, from $1,000 to $100,000. And when people see that, then they realize, you were talking before about payroll. Most employees get a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's not the case for owners.
No.
So,
No.
so if
Yeah,
you go
that's
to my
a good
LinkedIn,
point.
you can see this chart.
Making sure, letting others in the business besides finance understand the impact of slow collections is really beneficial. I mean, a lot of companies will get the sales team involved with it, but there are other customer facing folks. Now, obviously you don't want everyone in the company saying, hey, you're not paying me. But there are ways that the broader team can help bring this money in. So that's a great topic. Great. I'm sure that's really helpful. I will go and look for that. So similarly here in a service business, we'll have direct labor. We don't have cost of goods necessarily. One of the things that I think it's a really good idea to share in a service business is your how much of the labor goes towards customer facing projects versus how much of it is internal administration. So you're going to see direct labor. You may have other costs, and then you'll see indirect labor. So here we see 80% of the labor is going towards customer facing, a little bit less than 80%. Another thing to keep in mind on these charts is you may want to break them out. Similarly, we have these others. You may want to break them out by department. If you have a department that only has 1 or 2 people, be careful of showing that payroll number because it will be discernible what people are making. And again, we'll show debt servicing, taxes, and they may not have CapEx in service business, but they may have a new line of business that they want to launch and need some startup money for that. So really simplify that P&L. Do not send anyone 100 or 150 line P&L or balance sheet or anything like that. Really try and minimize the information, not minimize, but condense the information. Startups are a whole nother animal. You probably don't want to show a P&L because there's probably not any profit on it, but you're probably aware of what your runway and what your burn rate are. And I think founders are really hesitant to share this because they're afraid that employees are going to get scared. But you have that sense of urgency because you know how much runway you have. And your employees should really share in that sense of urgency. They can also come up with ideas that might reduce your burn rate. I mean, runway, you're going to need to take money in to extend it, but they might have suggestions, and they should be aware of what's going on. I think you should give them more credit than just being scared and running away if the news is bad. If you're confident and you believe in the business, as I'm sure you do, you can enlist them to believe in the business as well. This is an important topic here. One of the objections that I hear is that people are going to share this information. And I think you should just say to your employees, look, this is confidential information that I'm trusting you with, not to be shared outside this building. I trust you, which is why I'm sharing it with you. And in turn, your employees are going to start to trust you more as well. So really, call out that elephant in the room and just talk about how this information should be handled and how much you respect your employees and why you're sharing it with them.
Does it hurt, Judi, also to put confidential, not for distribution on the materials themselves, or does that contradict the trust message?
No, if you are going to actually distribute materials, yes. I don't always think that you should just widely distribute materials for a few reasons. First of all, most of the time it's going to need to come with some sort of explanation. So just sending out a P&L, even a condensed P&L, you're really going to want to explain what's going on there. You might share a full P&L with your senior leadership team, and that's fine. I still would put confidential on it. I think that's fine. But I think that this is much more appropriate shared in meetings. A quarterly meeting or a monthly meeting is the best way to share this. That way you can see if people's eyes start rolling up in their heads, or if they're looking concerned, you can answer questions right there. You can also do the education piece in line with that. Educate, you're gonna have to educate, and each month or quarter, as you dive a little bit deeper into your financials, you're going to have to educate again and more. This is not intuitive for most people, and it's not really well taught. You know, even if you have a bachelor's degree in engineering, you've probably never taken a finance class. I love a good display dashboard, somewhere where it's really well seen. You know, whatever the handful of KPIs that you're tracking, whether it's sales or units shipped or the dollar cost of waste, you know, whatever you're tracking at the moment, make sure that everybody can see it all the time. So I love seeing this in companies. And I do encourage my clients to keep control of the information, not to just hand out P&Ls or balance sheets to people. So this is the most important. I actually think this is the most important piece of financials, is the why and the how, the narrative around it. There is always a story behind the financials. And it's important that you're explaining the why and the how. What's going on in the industry these days? You know, why are you seeing different margins or different sales numbers? What's going on in the broader economy? I mean, we've all had labor and supply chain issues. One of my clients that I was with during the pandemic, as soon as the pandemic hit, his shipping and receiving manager was out looking for new sources of cardboard. Cardboard became a very hot commodity. You may or may not know. So, you know, a lot of the things that have happened in the economy, another client had to hire a lot of temp workers because they couldn't find the permanent people that they need. You see this also in healthcare, with companies hiring travel nurses that are making multiple times what their staff is making. So your costs will change dramatically if that's what's going on, and you need to be able to explain that. And
it also,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. It also occurs to me that situational awareness that you're describing goes both ways. If you're explaining the why and the how, there might be people in your company who are seeing things in the industry or seeing signals, you know, seeing things change that can inform your view of those questions.
Totally. Yes. Thank you so much for that, Eleanor. That's one of the big benefits of sharing this, is that as the employees start to see how the money flows in the company, they'll be able to come up with ideas, and they'll be able to come up with insights that you might not realize because you're not the one on the ground. So that's one of the big benefits of doing this. What else? We talked about, here's what we're doing with the profits. Having a good CapEx plan, a capital expenditure plan going out 3 to 5 or maybe even 10 or more years, depending on the industry, helps employees see where your company is going in the future and where their place in the company is. And then again, if things aren't going well, here's how we're turning things around. And your employees can also be a great source here as well. In all of these areas, you know, they can be a great source finding other new employees. They can be a great source with insight into the market. Vito, did you have something?
Yes, there's been quite a lot of discussion in various webinars and programs that I've attended about the younger generation of employees. So I want to go back to, here's what we're doing with the profits. They want to be serving the community. And there's a lot of discussion about that. And so when when we're talking about what we do at Kinnem, whenever we have our annual meeting, we always pick a nonprofit in the local community of Virginia Beach, where our home office is, and we bring them in to our meeting, and then we do a project with them at the meeting. And that really, I mean, it appeals to me, and I'm not a young employee, but it appeals to them in particular. I think that's something that we would definitely want to do when we have a discussion of what we do with profits.
You know what, Vito? That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm actually going to add that as a line item when I show that mocked up P&L, because all the companies that I work with have some sort of charitable contribution that they make every year.
Giving
and
back.
calling that out and showing that is a fantastic idea. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Hey,
Gavin
David.
has his hand up.
Hey, I was just gonna put into that, there's the turning things around if things aren't going well aspect of stuff, which you get like as soon as people understand what's going on and how, like you said, how the money flows through the company, how it works, they get excited about that. The other side that sometimes people don't really look at is sometimes it's easier to look at the things that are doing really well and push them even further than to fix the things that are not so great. So, sometimes you have like customers or products or whatever, and it's like, oh, this is really doggy, we're not like making money on it. It's, whatever, it's an iffy thing. And, people can spend an inordinate amount of time trying to fix that. And then the other thing to do is to look at like, oh, well, these products are doing really, really well. Oh, well, are there other customers that we could be selling those things to? Or are there other similar kinds of products that we could be selling to a whole bunch of customers, or, whatever the thing is, so that, because lots of times it's much easier to do better on the things you're already good at than to try to fix the stuff that's kind of lousy.
Yeah,
Focus on your
absolutely.
strengths.
Yeah. One of the things that I love doing with my clients is profit margin by product or by line of business or by customer type, slicing and dicing that profit, those profit numbers all different ways, and seeing where is not your revenue, where is your profit really coming from? Not included in this presentation, but I have shared that with different areas, different teams in some of my client companies. And you're right. Yeah. Leaning heavily on those profitable.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes the profitable things are profitable because they're really, really hard to do and they're a pain in the butt. And then so people go like, oh, it's that thing, it's going to be such a mess and we have to clean it all up and we have to spend all this time setting it up. And it's like, yeah, but we all know that, when we make this stuff, this is where a huge percentage of our profit comes from. So everybody's then excited about doing it and making sure it goes really, really well, because that one, because if you can make that one go like 5% better, that counts for more than making the lousy one go 50% better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It gets even more complicated in some of the smaller companies that I work with. Some of the non-profitable ones, the owners are really passionate about. And yes, we all want to make money, but I don't think any of us are here.
Wait, you mean non-profitable? You don't mean non-profits. You mean people that are not making a profit.
Or lines of business or products that are not making a profit, even otherwise healthy business. Are sometimes passion projects.
Yeah. They can also be discovery projects too.
Yep,
like
absolutely.
Research and discovery initiative. But Gavin's point about employees accepting the inconvenience of certain types of workflow processes because they're tied to high profit centers reminds me of a story from yesterday's presentation about a paper mill and how bad the air smelled. And when a consultant came in, he asked the employees what they thought of it. And they were, and it wasn't unpleasant to them. They were like, smells like money. So.
Yeah. Good. They understand. They had a deeper understanding then. Awesome. Okay. I just have a couple more slides. I think I just have one more slide. Pushback. You might experience pushback. You might have managers that are afraid of losing power. And I know like a lot of you are going to say that then there are other issues in the organization. Yes, absolutely. You might have a finance team that is afraid of more work, and this might be a little bit more work for them. We'll address all of these concerns. And you might have folks that feel ill-equipped to answer whatever questions might come at them. So solutions, obviously you need to involve your management team early. Make sure that they know that not everybody is going to have every piece of information. And it's only going to help them in the long run. Include your finance team in the planning. And in fact, let your finance team come up with this abridged P&L. Just keeping in mind that you might have to do something with payroll if you're doing it by department and you have some small 1 or 2 person departments. So let them come up with that. Oftentimes these can just be rolled up versions of the full financials that a finance team would provide you. And then finally, you need to be there. You need to make sure that the employees can come to you with their concerns, with their questions, if they don't understand something that's going on. And you need to be there to back your managers up too, if they don't feel like they're equipped to answer some of these questions. So takeaways, finally, be prepared to answer the questions, be prepared to roll it out slowly and have a path in mind of what, how you want to share, how you want to grow the circle of sharing, the information and the people that you're sharing with. This one, I have to reiterate, go slowly. Communicate, over communicate, and then communicate some more than you think you have to, because people aren't going to get it right out of the gate. You're going to need to educate them. And then ultimately, you're going to enjoy the benefits of having a more engaged, more informed, more educated workforce. So that's that for my formal stuff, guys. Any more questions?
I have one, going back to the cost and the product line cost and things like that. I think it's also important, and maybe you hit on it and I didn't hear it properly. But you have to make sure that the underlying financial costing is accurate for the product line, meaning, I'll give you an example. I had a client once a number of years ago that thought they were making great money on a product line, because when they looked at it in standard costing accounting percentage, they had a 30% profitability, but that product line was really the only product line that used certain aluminum materials. So they had to make sure they always had that supply. It wasn't a common shared part. There was additional technical support that was required for the customer. They had a number of different processes that were purely dedicated to that line. And when you started adding up all of the expense, and they really didn't have any other way of bridging into that market without a significant adder on, what they found was that other product lines were carrying the load because they did a shared overhead accounting, as opposed to looking on activity-based accounting or some sort of dedicated cost accounting towards an item. And so there was this general feeling that, we were making a lot of money, but the reality of it is that was probably either break even or losing money in an area that really had no expansion or growth prospects, and it was chewing up a lot of resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is all predicated on having accurate and timely financials. And I know that that is not always a given, which is why I have a job, frankly. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm also looking at it from the perspective of, you can have two precision, 2 decimal places of precision in an inaccurate process. In other words, the underlying assumptions you have in your financials, how you have to ask the question of, how are you allocating overhead and why?
Yeah.
Okay, most companies just sort of say it's 300% or 200% overhead allocation, and never ask the question, well, how many of our engineers need to support, are actually supporting that product? And you might say, well, it's mature and nobody supports it. We have no engineering. All of our engineering is going into new product over here. And the other ones, maybe we get a call once every 6 months about it, and nobody on the floor needs to get involved, and it basically runs itself. And you're finding out, yeah, but we're only making 15. Yeah, but it's 15 every time, and nobody has to touch it. It's just, found money, and there's no sales involved or whatever. But if you don't ask those fundamental questions, people often take the accuracy of the numbers as gospel, as opposed to looking behind the numbers and saying, well, how did we come up with that overhead rate, or why is that being applied in that fashion?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Paul. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
I love what Paul just said. And then the other thing, going way back to the beginning of the discussion too, I would just add that I've observed that there tends to be a correlation between the companies that pay slowly and the companies that are high maintenance. So not only do they pay you slowly, but they also they need stuff rush. They need the special favor. They need, whatever, that kind of thing. So, versus I don't know, the companies that pay on time tend to be well organized and also not need a lot of hand holding and the process tend to run smoother. So, part of the deal there is to think about when somebody is paying slowly, or, if this is a steady issue over and over again, can that relationship, are they also high maintenance? And then if they are, then can that relationship somehow be changed so that they have more respect for you and your company and what you're doing and what you need, and you set up some things in place so that they get a reminder, hey, by the way, you haven't ordered this in 2 weeks, you usually order it every week, and are you about to run out or something, to help them with their systems a little bit, and just basically strengthen that relationship to make it worthwhile.
Absolutely. And that's a benefit of breaking down these walls and sharing this information throughout the company, is that, the finance team, who knows that this company is always 90 days, doesn't know that they're a total pain in the butt to the service team or the manufacturers. And
exactly. Customer service and other people need to know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And at some point, if you can't fix that relationship, it may need to be ended.
Yeah, exactly. Find other ones that are really good and then let that one go.
Can you legitimately charge those customers more, Judi, or is that illegal?
Well, you can and you should always have a clause in your contract that allows you to charge interest and recoup any collections costs. And you can decide to pull that trigger or not, but it should be in the contract so you can recoup some of that. I don't think it's illegal to charge different. It's not. No,
you can have different rates for different.
Yeah, we had a P&S clause, pain and suffering.
Yeah.
We literally had that guy was never going, because most of ours we had a list price and discount rates from there based upon the category. And there was one customer in particular, we ended up firing the customer because he was such a bully / pain in the ass. And I agree with Gavin that, when companies react slowly and think slowly and expect you to make up the difference, they do it across it's not like just one pocket within the company, the rest of the company, because they're afraid. It's the fear, speed factor.
Yeah.
In the company, they tend to have a culture of fear, and therefore they move very slowly. And it's your job to make up for that lack of speed in their decision making and the risk taking.
Yeah.
So you end up paying for it if you always say the customer is king. So part of it is sort of saying after a while is, I can't deal with you. Sorry. And if your behavior doesn't change, we're not going to tolerate it. I do disagree with Gavin on one thing. You don't have to wait until you find somebody else.
That's true. Yeah.
The best motivation to find somebody else is to let somebody go.
Yep. Make that space. Yeah.
Judi,
Yes, Vito.
you talked about putting the cost of collections in your agreement.
Yeah.
And I want to caution you to be very careful about that.
Why?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Because we are living in a time where the collection laws, in fact, the current administration just changed December 1st, the Fair Debt Credit Protection Act, the first changes since 1978. And since that change, which is called Regulation F, there's a new one now. So starting July 1st, medical practices, they have to be very careful about putting anybody on a credit report. And if they've paid a bill, the credit bureaus are going to be removing those from the people's credit history. Starting next year, January 1st, if a medical bill is under $500, they're not even going to be allowed to put that on somebody's credit report. So that's just one example. The other example is that when you talk about collection costs, now, if you say we have interest and we're putting 1.5% on it monthly, that's a very specific and reasonable rate. But most times, what I have found in the last 18 years is when a business owner says, we're going to cover our collection costs, they're thinking that if they go to an agency that's charging 50% or 25%, that they're going to say, okay, you don't owe me $1,000, you owe me $1,400. No, that is not a reasonable way according to the laws. So be careful with that. If you use interest, that's one thing. In our business, in our company, because we have a, what did you call it? A tiered approach. I love that.
Yes.
So on the first tier or two, you're still in charge and you can negotiate with those fees. So very often someone will say, well, what's this $58 extra? Well, that's the interest. Oh my God, do I have to pay that? Well, if I can get your credit card right now, I'll forego that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, so that works in your favor, but not if you're using a contingency agency because they don't want you talking to the people. That's one of the differences about what we do.
Yeah, and that's what I meant when I said you can decide whether you're going to pull that trigger or not and charge them or you know, require them to pay back the interest. But thank you for that information on the collections fees. I'll make sure to check with my attorney before I advise a client to put that in again. I suspect it's different for different industries.
Okay, we'll look forward to your attorney's answer.
Yeah. I would just throw in too, one of the things we used to do is, you know, when the customer would call in, you know, and rush, I need this really fast. Say, okay, yeah, well, we're gonna have it. There's an expediting charge for that. You know, and then you know, you can waive the expediting charge the first time and say, you know, do we need to set up some sort of system? You know, can you put in, we have a standard order that you're releasing off of, or some other thing, so we avoid this in the future. And then, you know, and then the second time it happens, it's like, yeah, no, we're not waiving that. Now you're getting charged that. And by the way, would you like to like set something up so this doesn't happen again? You know, that kind of thing. So you're just, and that helps to take care of it, that part of it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Gavin.
Judi, I was just thinking about, I really enjoyed the presentation, by the way. I've never heard you speak so clearly on this, and it really plays into the conscious world of wealth distribution, you know, and transparency. So thanks for the thoughtfulness around that. Do you have any like case studies of companies that have rolled this out that have been able to improve their KPIs, whatever they might be?
So that's kind of challenging because most of the time I don't share who my clients are. You know, the one that I worked with in your neighborhood, he was fine with that because I was out in the world as his CFO. I do, you know, try to weave in a lot of real life stories into my presentations, but not really with any identifying information.
Yeah.
It's a secret.
I suppose I could do anonymous case studies.
because I believe it's all true. And I can follow your methodology pretty well. And I guess it's interesting to have Gavin and Paul on because they've had this experience within the manufacturing environments that you're talking about. So
yeah, Gavin and Paul, I'm interested in what did you guys share and how?
Well, we shared a lot.
I know you did, yeah.
So yeah, and what we did was from my perspective, actionable information really fast was key. So what we did was we set up a system, a subsystem in our computer where basically when you finish a batch of making something, you would put in, I just made a batch of this. The computer would know, that and how many pounds it was, and the computer would know, okay, so that was, this much of this ingredient, that much of that, whatever, all the costs of all those things. And then you put in the time that it took. And then, so there was, like to Paul's point earlier, there was over, the time for that machine, the value of the machine, the room that it was in, the overhead allocated with that machine, per hour, it was all in the computer system. So, it took me 2.5 hours to make 1,000 pounds. I put that in there, and then we had another list that the system would go and look at, where we basically maintained like the average price over the last couple of months that we sold that product from too. Because maybe I'm selling to I'm making for customer A, tomorrow I'll make it, whatever. But the employee doesn't necessarily know which customer this is going to get shipped to. So we don't care about that. But then, so once they put that in, then it would tell them right there and then how much profit we made on it.
Cool.
And so that if you just made a batch of something and you lost $250, you're like, oh my God, what did I just do? And so if Paul's my supervisor, I'm going like, Paul, I just made a batch and I got 20 more to do just like that. And I just lost $250. What did I do? What's wrong? And so then, we'd look at it, we'd figure it out, or, I would make something and it's like, wow, we did really fabulously well. And I could compare it to previous runs and things. And we'd also have discussions ahead of time before we would run a product that go like, okay, this is on the last time we did this series of, 20 batches, this was the average, this is how it should come in, this is about, so people would get an idea like what they were shooting for.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And we came up, you would believe, like the number of products we discovered that people thought were like for these big customers and everything. We were losing money all the time. And accounting had no clue. So, it wasn't until we like drove this up and then we'd have like a process improvement meeting on it. And we'd say like, okay, so here's this product, and we just can't figure out how to make money on it. And people go like, oh, okay. We'd be talking to, purchasing and all these different groups trying to figure out how to make it better. And that's where, we would find that, and we'd look at the ones that were really crummy. We'd also look at the ones that were fabulously good. And very, very often, much easier to make $1,000 more per batch on something that we were already making $5,000 on, versus trying to take something that we were losing $250 and maybe lose $50, that kind of thing. It was just, yeah. And then you would tell the salespeople, look, these customers or these products are on the endangered species list, unless you do something about it, this is gone. As soon as we find something better to cover the overhead or whatever, then this thing's out of here. So, do it. If you want to save your business with that customer, do something about it now. Don't wait till we find a better one,
I love that instant information. Yeah, thank you.
Well, listen, in respect to Judi's time and everybody on the call, I want to thank you guys for showing up today. It's been really enlightening and always good to hear from you, Judi, particularly in this financial context and with which you're so well versed. So thanks a bunch. Great to meet you all, and we'll see you here next time.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Great.
Glenn.
Thanks.